we have to tell people kind of what the history was. So they're not.
You're absolutely right. One point on that, Cleave. I think you're so right on that. And the reason that it might as well just be addressed is because even if we were to try to take some sort of practical, pragmatic approach that it's not worth addressing these things, let's just kind of shove it away. Somebody's going to bring it up.
Yes.
And if we're in the age now where everything basically just makes it onto Twitter, whether we like it or not. So given that reality, we might as well address it. If it's the 1990s, I understand not really making that public. It's not that relevant to the laity. It doesn't matter. But we're not in the 1990s. We're in 2025. We're in Buck Rogers. Everything's going to be potentially out there now. So we might as well address it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's something that needs to be addressed. But one of the beauties about the Orthodox Church is that we have a conciliar church governance system. So that kind of protects us from a lot of this stuff, even if there were to be somebody who was maybe influenced by state actors, so on and so forth. Right. It's not the end of Orthodoxy. We've seen this several times throughout church history, where the Patriarch of Constantinople has been, in the past, a heretic. So, I mean, it's not an ender for our system.
Well, and also the state as an entity trying to control or install bishops, right? It's not, everybody knows about KGB bishops, NKVD bishops. We've all heard this coming out of the Cold War, but people forget that there were Arian emperors that tried to install and control the church with Arian priests and bishops. There were iconoclast emperors that tried to control and steer the church. And one evidence, I think, that the church is the true church is that if those emperors couldn't turn the church into some big heresy factory, it's the true church, because they tried everything to do so.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm just going to dive through some of these documents here in this article that was actually very, very good. This is on Orthodox history. This is Matthew Namey was the author of this article here. So this is a statement from the Greek Archbishop at the time, soon to be Ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras. This was the Greek Archbishop to the proto-CIA, basically the OSS. Your directions will be executed faithfully. This was a public letter that was released. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll read the pertinent citation here, and then I'm going to jump into part 2 of his article here. So in an OSS, I'm going to zoom in so you can actually read this. In an OSS inter-office memo dated March 26, 1942, an intelligence agent named Julius L. Amos wrote to his fellow OSS agent named David Burns, familiar name for some people here. The Archbishop was extremely pleased at having met and lunched with you. He has told me that the entire facilities of his organization are at our disposal. He puts it in these words: I have 3 bishops, 300 priests, and a large and far-flung organization. Every one under my order is under yours. You may command them for any service you require. There will be no questions asked, and your directions will be executed faithfully. Please tell Mr. Burns for me that this is so. So the context of this letter is we are in the heat of the, basically what's ramping up to be the Cold War. The then soon-to-be Patriarch Athenagoras, he's now Archbishop, is basically writing back and forth between the OSS, letting him know that his people are at his disposal, whatever can serve the United States cause at the time when they were kind of at conflict with the Russians. And here's a picture after. This is right before he is made Ecumenical Patriarch. President Truman and Archbishop Athenagoras basically meeting. He's, kissing the president's head here. So the more, I guess, so this is a very shocking statement. He's basically just pledging his undying support for an intelligence agency. So
now, can I add to that real quick? And I don't want to steal your thunder because I want you to go through this article as much as you want, but this is very relevant to ecumenism because Athenagoras is precisely the patriarch that meets with Paul VI to announce that we're all one church again. There's no more anathemas, supposedly, and we can try to move towards reunion. That's the famous, meeting between Athenagoras and Paul VI. But if we know the history of Paul VI, and I know quite a bit about him from being a trad cat for many years, Paul VI was also helped to come into office by the CIA, and that comes from many Catholic writers, not just critics like Paul Williams, but even John Kaler in his book admits that the CIA was very nervous about the overtures that John the 23rd gave to the Soviets. John the 23rd was beginning to do these really suspicious sort of ecumenical parties and actions and celebrations. This is discussed in Xavier Wren's book on him. And then on Vatican II, I should say. And then he had this idea that the Soviets weren't that bad, and that perhaps we could have this open sort of aggiornamento, he called it, and rapprochement, perhaps. This really worried a lot of people in the CIA. And so they wanted to be sure that the next person coming in would be on board. And so they actually met with Montini before he became Pope. And they basically said, Kissinger wants you. We're going to make sure that it's you, to be clear that we don't get into anything dealing with the Vatican Bank. Now, there's a lot of tradcats that have what's called the Siri thesis, Cardinal Siri and all this, but whatever is going on with the Siri thesis and Cardinal Siri, they were concerned that when he was elected, when he was considered a potential electee, he was going to look into the Vatican Bank. John Paul I, this is another reason that he died, most likely, was also interested in looking at the Vatican Bank. So this touches directly on Gladio, P2, and the CIA connection to the Vatican Bank, because, as I mentioned with William Colby, it's Colby that initially helped set up the first $65 million loan from the OSS, or from the CIA, I should say, to the Vatican Bank in 1947. So there's this long-standing relationship, again, going back to Pius XII's era, and that can't be touched or messed with. At the same time, the CIA believes, and this is actually not just from all the histories of ecumenism that you could read, including the David Wimhoff book, but even though I didn't expect this when I read the Graziano text, that when he talks about ecumenism, he speaks of it as something that the OSS and CIA were absolutely supportive of.
Yeah,
they were huge supporters of ecumenism, because they felt like if they could get Paul VI and Athenagoras together, if they could reunite the church in this sort of new ecumenist movement, this would be a powerful force against Sovietism in the Cold War.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that was kind of you see that ramping up now in the political discourse. They're trying to drive this dialectic between Russian Orthodoxy and this kind of Americanized ecumenical patriarchate Orthodoxy, and they're trying to make this dialectic very clear. And you see people like Rep. Joe Wilson publicly calling for investigations of ROCOR churches, so on and so forth. So this is still happening today, and it's not a coincidence that these meetings and all of these things that are circulating, the statement by the archons, which was basically saying that the UOC church, it was like attacking the OCU parishioners, so on and so forth. Did you see that statement? The Greek archons? I could actually pull it up. Yeah, archons accuse the UOC of targeting and killing members of the OCU. So we see multiple statements like this. There was a statement by Elpidophoros not too long ago, very recently. I'll just go ahead and read that. It says, Russia presented itself as a protector of Orthodoxy. This was after the visit between Leo and Bartholomew. This is a statement by Elpidophoros. He's talking about the collapse of Syria during the revolution, the recent revolution. He says one of the best things that happened was it was released from the Russian tutelage. He's trying to draw this dialectic here. Russia presented itself as a protector of Orthodoxy, but in reality, it used Orthodox ideology just as communist ideology once was, as an ideological cloak for national and global ambitions. Our faith becomes a tool of state interest. This is dangerous for both the church and its people. So he's not just attacking Russia geopolitically. He's actually attacking the Russian Orthodox as well in that statement, saying that they're basically a tool of the state, which was the same thing that we saw Rep. Joe Wilson say. So I don't know about you, but my spidey sense goes off when I start to see statements by hierarchs and statements of politicians match the same exact tune within a week of these ecumenical meetings. So I don't think it's any coincidence.
No, and in fact, we know that this link is absolutely verified. In fact, there's many articles going back many years over at orthochristian.com that detailed the intimate connection between former CIA heads, John McCain, State Department, even publicly lauding and praising their actions and operations on Twitter in Ukraine in setting up the schismatic church, using a formerly defrocked guy named Dumenko, formerly of the KGB, who the Patriarch of Constantinople previously said was defrocked. So suddenly now he's all good, everything's cool, and we got to remember that the EP reversed its own stance on the schism in Ukraine, presumably because of U.S. and State Department pressure. Mike Pompeo, who was the CIA director at the time, even publicly talked about how happy he was that he had helped Zelensky create this schism in the Orthodox Church. So that's all public record, and you can just find tons of archived articles at Ortho Christian.
Yep, absolutely. And when the U.S. aid spending became public, they realized that a lot of this was actually going towards funding disunity within that UOC-OCU conflict there. So this is basically intelligence agencies funneling money to drive division within this region, and it's to disrupt, basically from their standpoint, Russia's efforts. But also, what it does is it drives disunity within the church itself.
Yes, they did the same thing, by the way, in Macedonia. The exact same move with Orthodoxy there. They've tried it in places like Georgia as well. So it's the same model. So this is not some unique thing. They'll run the same sort of script in a lot of those, Baltic area countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see it time and time again. All right, let me dive into this, and then I'll give you the floor after I go through this article here, because I think this will be interesting. This is probably something that people don't know very much about. So this was the deposition of Maximos V, and this is according to CIA records that were made public. So this is Maximos V being deposed, and then the propping up of Archbishop Athenagoras, who then becomes the Ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras, who, for those of you that are not familiar, he was the Patriarch Athenagoras was he was a 33-degree Freemason. This is actually public record. If you were to look at the Greek Freemasonic Lodge, they actually have him listed on their website as a 33rd degree Mason. So he did have Freemasonic ties there. So that probably played, that part is not in this article, but that probably played a link as far as how they made contact to him to begin with, because they typically do play that role as kind of power brokers there.
There's also, prior to I forget the guy's name, but the guy prior to Athenagoras, there's also a declassified cable with him as well, talking to the OSS. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yep, no worries. All right, so I'm going to dive into this. So basically, the context of this, so we remember in the previous article, we were looking, the OSS had already made contact with the then Archbishop Athenagoras. He pledged the service of all of his bishops and his priests to the OSS during the Cold War. So this
I'm sorry, hold on. I'm sorry. You had the picture up of, are you reading the one that has Maximus V at the top?
Yes.
Okay, that's the other one. I'm sorry, that's who I was talking about. I have to look at two different screens. So Maximus V is the other one that I was talking about.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually going to be discussed a little bit in this
Okay,
article.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They did have no worries at all. I appreciate you coming on and discussing this. This is a good discussion. Not a lot of people know this information.
Exactly.
So basically the backdrop to this is the OSS has already made contact with Athenagoras. He's pledged his support to the American intelligence agency. The OSS, for those of you that don't know, is a precursor to the CIA. So Athenagoras has already pledged his support, his bishops, and his priests. So now we're going to fast forward a couple of years.
Oh, this is the guy who succeeded him, not his predecessor. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
I got it backwards.
Yeah, Athenagoras succeeded Maximos.
Oh wait, no, I was right. Okay,
yeah, you were correct.
I'm just getting confused.
No worries. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll dive through this. So a source in close contact with the Patriarch reports that Maximos, who is currently the Ecumenical Patriarch at the time, this is 46. In the previous article, we were around 1942, I believe. So Maximos is suffering from an acute nervous attack and shows grave symptoms of insanity. So he had some severe mental health issues, and the situation was relatively unstable. So basically what the CIA was thinking was they were going to kind of capitalize on the situation and put their own man in the position, because they'd already made inroads with Athenagoras. So the game plan was basically to depose Maximos and to put in Athenagoras. So let's read through some of these kind of back and forths here. January 16th, the CIA reported serious thought is being given to the deposition of the Patriarch, but his followers are reluctant to take such a step until they are satisfied by the doctors that Maximo's condition is incurable. Meanwhile, an unrelated scandal emerged. It seemed that in 1940, 4 Greek attorneys engaged by the Patriarchate had stolen money that a wealthy benefactor had bequeathed to the Patriarch in his will, in the Patriarchate in his will. Although the late Patriarch Benjamin led the Ecumenical Patriarchate in 1940, everyone knew then that Metropolitan Maximos was the real power behind the throne. The CIA observed, as Patriarch Maximos was in complete charge of the Patriarchate in 1940, when the late Patriarch Benjamin was ill, certain elements in the Phanar wish Maximos to assume some of the responsibility for the scandal. So the scandal is resurfacing. It's kind of come to the surface. The CIA is writing back and forth that serious thought is being taken to his deposition, and they're basically going to be putting in their own person.
And note, too, that just as with what I was claiming about the papacy, if they're concerned about a patriarch, they're definitely going to be concerned about a pope, too. So it's not going to be outlandish to think that the CIA is very concerned about whether Paul VI gets elected or not.
Absolutely. Yep. They're concerned on both fronts. And ultimately, like you said, the goal would be to have these two fronts rejoin. It's no coincidence that Athenagoras being propped up basically by the predecessors of the CIA, the OSS, and American geopolitical power being put into this position is the first ecumenical patriarch in 500 years to meet with the Pope and have unity talks. The first ecumenical patriarch to meet with the Pope in 500 years. You think that's a coincidence? So the first one that's propped up by American geopolitical power is the first one that's pushing for ecumenism. And this is actually talked about by St. Paisios as well. He has several statements he writes about Patriarch Athenagoras during this time as well, which I'll get into maybe a little later if we have time. I posted it on my X page a little while back, so you can go and read that citation if you want. So anyway, we'll continue on. A February 14th CIA report, the Turkish papers have published a statement to the effect that the Soviet Consul General had placed the Russian summer embassy at the disposal of the Patriarch. Phanar officials insist, however, there is no foundation to this report and are of the opinion two papers in question obviously rich to create difficulties for the Patriarchate by giving the impression of close collaboration with the Soviets. So you have these two kind of factions fighting for control during this time. This is the narrative that they're pushing. So they're pushing the necessity of their intervention into the ecumenical patriarchate. They're saying, if we don't put our guy in here, the Soviets are going to put their guy in here. That's kind of that's the false crisis that they're setting up. A few days prior to that CIA report, the one that we were just talking about, where they manufactured the narrative of the Soviets putting their person into this position, Archbishop Athenagoras was in Washington awarding President Truman with a piece of the True Cross. This was when the famous photo was taken of Athenagoras kissing Truman on the head. So just a few days prior to that CIA report, you get this famous picture here. This is Athenagoras here. All right, I'm going to skip down a little bit and we'll discuss the actual deposition and when Athenagoras is put into power. May 21st, the CIA reported that Maximos was traveling to Athens to consult with specialists. If he is found to be incurable, it is believed that his resignation as patriarch will be accepted. But a bit later, July 3rd, the CIA seems to have corrected itself, saying the real reason for Maximos' visit to Greece was not the reported health issues, but for consultation concerning 3 major issues: whether Maximos should resign in favor of a stronger personality, if he should resign, what candidate would be favorable to Athens, and how can the Phanar deal with the increasing prestige of Patriarch Alexei of Moscow? So you have these two kind of, you have this geopolitical issue brewing between not only geopolitical powers, but within the two patriarchates. CIA explained why the Patriarch would need to go to Athens to discuss these matters. The Phanar in Istanbul is dominated financially by the Greek government. All right, so we skip down a little bit. I'm going to get to the statements in which he is deposed. Hold on one moment. Anyway, so long story short, the CIA helps in the deposition of Maximos and places Athenagoras on the ecumenical patriarchal throne. So a new day had dawned for the ecumenical patriarchate and for world orthodoxy. With Athenagoras on the throne, the U.S. finally had a reliable, stable leader that could help in the fight against communism. So again, you have this Cold War kind of rhetoric here. This is all about the fight against communism. That's why this is necessary. That's why these inroads were necessary. The same exact rhetoric that you see with the links between the OSS and the Roman Catholic Church during the time of Operation Gladio. This is a necessary evil. We have to, ally with these people because it's all about the fight against communism. Amongst all sorts of evidence for this, see the 1951 CIA report. Anyway, I'm going to link this document in the link to this video, but this is pertinent information. So we have the Patriarch Athenagoras at the time, who basically, when he was an archbishop, pledged his full support to the OSS. I mean, it doesn't get much more clear than that. I have X amount of bishops. I have X amount of priests. They are all under your command. We won't ask any questions. That's basically what he says to him.
Yeah, exactly. And to tie this in also to the Roman Catholic world, you had back in the 1950s under the direction of a guy named C.D. Jackson, who worked in psychological warfare for the CIA. He also worked in Hollywood, by the way. He came up with this idea called the Doctrinal Warfare Program, and you can actually look up these documents. One is called the Psychology Strategy Board Directive D33 or PSB D33. This is a declassified effort to counter communist ideology through propaganda, cultural, and doctrinal influence, targeting institutions like the Roman Catholic Church. In 2002, there were FOIA documents that got some of these, but it was fully declassified in 2013. So the full-on C.D. Jackson, Edward P. Lilly doctrinal warfare program was declassified, which basically proves all of this. So it's not a conspiracy theory. You have to understand that what we're talking about here are real declassified cables, discussions, communiques, and documents that discuss how to turn these religious institutions into forms of American soft power. Now, you might say, well, but it's justified because we got to fight the atheistic Soviets. Well, the problem is when you make this sort of an alliance, when you say, as the patriarch did here, all of my priests and my whole jurisdiction is at your disposal, you're opening it up to a lot of corruption. That's the problem here, because now you're basically saying we have a new master. Is basically choosing two masters, right? Or choosing between two different thieves, as one article put it. So you have KGB and you've got the CIA. And even though, yeah, it might be the case that a lot of people were aided by British intelligence and the CIA when they fled Bolsheviks, when they fled the NKVD, when they fled the Soviets, when they fled Ceausescu in Romania. I know, Orthodox priests that were under Romanian persecution, for example, who've come to the West. And they don't all immediately just love and worship the CIA. They point out that now you're under the same thing that we were under. You're going into, the sort of communist socialist persecution in America that we went through where we fled. So they're recognizing the same things. And these agencies and these institutions are not your friend. They're really engines of power. They're not necessarily, they're only as good as the people that are in those institutions. And if the institutions are staffed with woke, purple-haired people, as the CIA has been for a long time, it's not gonna be a good thing for the church.
Yeah, I think a lot of that honestly has to do, and I know our opinions might disagree on. You might disagree with my opinion on this particular take, but I think a lot of that wokeness probably comes from the early Freemasonic ties that basically influenced the United States founding. I mean, we have major figures within the founding of the United States. George Washington himself was loyal to his lodge by which he was a member. We have several of the founding fathers that were Freemasons. They were very prevalent within the founding of the United States. Also, George Washington was a member of the Episcopal Church, and there are several Freemasonic ties to that particular organization. And we already know that the Freemasons had multiple different ties to intelligence agencies such as the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA later on in its development. They played the role of power broker. They did this also for British intelligence.
Absolutely.
So it was it's kind of like a spider organization. They don't have as much power as they did, but you could call it by another name. I'm sure You've probably read the Alta Vendita.
I have, yeah. Yeah, let me be clear. I don't at all disagree with you. What maybe some people misunderstood what I said on a live stream a while back. Somebody asked about whether I think Freemasons are running everything. What I said was that amongst younger people, I don't think there's much of a concern for Freemasonry. Right. So like people that are in seminary nowadays, I doubt many of them, the younger up and coming clergy, are members of the lodge. I'm sure there's some. But I think that if you get into like, you know, the boomers, I'm sure there's plenty of boomer clergy in the Orthodox Church, bishops that are members of the lodge. Absolutely. In fact, I know in Greece, it's very widespread. Many Greek prelates are members of the lodge. And I'm sure in Russia, there's prelates that are members of the lodge as well. So I don't at all discount that. Ultimately, I just meant that amongst the younger you go, I think there's less and less interest in Freemasonry, but not that Freemasonry has always had a very close relationship to the ecumenist movement. They've always had, they're sort of the proto-ecumenists. So no, I totally think you're on board moving in the right direction to say that, yeah, Masonry plays a big role in ecumenism. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, you could probably, even if you were to say that the organization of the Freemasons doesn't have as much power, you could just call them by another name. You can call them by the ecumenical movement. I mean, it's the same mindset. It's the same goals. It's the same end goal. And the Alta Vendita, it basically laid out the game plan for the subversion of the Roman Catholic Church. For those of you that are not aware, the Alta Vendita is the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita. This is a Freemasonic playbook, basically, for their subversion of the Roman Catholic Church, not to put a Freemason on the throne of Peter, but to basically instill Enlightenment ideas and liberal axioms into the Roman Catholic Church, so that eventually there will be elected a pope that is amenable to these Enlightenment ideas and liberal axioms. So within the Alta Vendita, the strategy that was advanced is basically the dissemination of liberal ideas and axioms throughout society within the institutions of the Catholic Church, so that the laity and prelates would, over the years, be imbued with progressive principles. And there, basically, it would just be spread across the board. That's kind of the goal. And the motto of the Alta Vendita was basically the soldier dies, the war goes on. So it's not just a one-time play. This is something that they're in it for the long. They're in it for the long haul. I mean, ultimately, it seems like it's had some effect. The reason I bring it up at all, so we look at the Freemasonic ties of Athenagoras, right? He was a member of the lodge, the Greek lodge. He was a 33rd degree Freemason, and we look at the current Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, who wrote the foreword to a book on geopolitics that was written by Master Mason Nicholas Laus.
Nicholas Laus, yes. I used to interact and debate with Laus on Facebook. And funny you said that. I was going to bring up Laus as an example of a modern Greek Orthodox rabid Mason. So you went right where I was going to go. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got the mind meld going on right now, man.
By the way, the guy, also the guy that was involved in the Greek church calendar issue was a Mason too, like 100 years or over 100 years ago. His name is Metaxaxis. Yeah, there's another one of these guys going back even further that was a Mason too. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
So I'm
sure there was, but
this was so when you had the old calendar schism in Greece, one of the reasons that the schism happened was because the patriarch was a Freemason, if I recall. I'm not saying that makes schism good. I'm just saying, like, because it's a really complicated issue. I'm looking this up, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, we literally have an icon where Athenagoras is depicted as outside of the church. Yep, and they have the demon of Freemasonry behind him in that arc icon. Yep, I've seen that as well. Yeah, but Archbishop Elpidophoros wrote the introduction to the Greek version of the book by Master Mason Nicholas Laus, titled Neopolitik. So if you want to check out this book and you're watching this live stream, that book is titled Neopolitik. This is what Elpidophoros wrote. And this basically this book is about Freemasonic subversion of political systems.
By the way, Matthew Nami at Orthodox History, I just realized he has an article on this. It's called A Brief Life of Melitios Metaxakis,
Mm.
and he is the ecumenist Freemasonic patriarch in the 1920s.
Mm. Yep. So it definitely played a role, I think, in some of these ties and changes. So he wrote Elpidophoros wrote the foreword to the book Neopolitic. This is basically what he wrote in it. He wrote, "With great joy and deep satisfaction, I read the work of the exceptional intellectual Nicholas Laus in this area of philosophy, theology, and politics. It is a bright work which is filled with an academic strictness and also great boldness. With all my soul, I congratulate Nicholas Laus for his sharpness during the writing of this work, which fills a great absence in this area of philosophy, theology, and political science." So he writes the foreword and endorses this book on Freemasonic political subversion. We were just talking about the Alta Vendita, and what were the goals of that? Dissemination of Enlightenment ideas and liberal axioms amongst these kind of theological frameworks. So let's fast forward to Francis, some of the statements that were made by him. All religions are a path to heaven, that kind of thing. You actually see Elpidophoros say just about the same statement, not that long after Francis said it. So where do you think these ties come from? That's just kind of where my mind goes. It seems like they did their task in these two particular areas.
Yeah, I remember when I was a trad cat back in the 2000s, when I first read the Alta Vendita, I was kind of blown away, and it prompted me to then go and read at that time, Vatican's response, because you had several popes going all the way back to the 1700s during the time of the French Revolution that had actually written encyclicals against Freemasonry, warning that they had a plot to destroy Christian civilization. Yeah. I think one of the Clements was one of the first in the 1700s, all the way up to Leo XIII's famous encyclical Humani Generis, which is a really expansive rejection of all the Freemasonic principles, which he calls in that work organized naturalism. So same strategy here, and it's not accidental that the Freemasonic patriarchs are saying the same thing as the post-Vatican II popes are saying.